because I do feel like a lot of times when people start going deeper into trafficking, it's like, well, why is trafficking something that cracks your heart open? Why is it really tearing at your soul? And a lot of times that's because of some brokenness they've either experienced or seen in their life that they would love to see wholeness. Because I don't feel like we're at the point in the anti-human trafficking movement where people should just do anything. They should be having insightful action. You've got to actually understand what you're going to go do.
Action and educated action. We need to be educated about these issues. So this is the INNOVAT3 Podcast. I'm your host, Ted Haas, and I'm here with my new friend, Betty Ann. How do you pronounce your last name?
Hagenau.
Wow, glad I let you pronounce that. She is the founder of Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, which is now Freedom in Sight.
That's right.
And we met through our mutual friend, Vanessa. And as soon as I heard you, you're into stopping human trafficking, creating a world where human trafficking doesn't exist, transforming communities and building coalitions, which is really what we're all about. And I'm like, okay, let's connect. And you were gracious enough to be on this show. So thank you. So why don't you introduce yourself and, how did you get into this work?
Thanks, Ted. It's great to talk to you. And I know we have so much in common, everything from our athletic past to our heart for disrupting human trafficking.
Just a warning, this whole podcast might be about basketball.
It's all going to come back to athletic analogies. Yes, you're right. Grew up in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area here. Really had my eyes open to human rights abuses in college. I was a college basketball player, spent a lot of time in the gym, and I started taking some international relations classes because a lot of my family's in Germany. And so I started taking other languages and studying international issues.
Families in Germany?
Yeah, I have like 35 cousins in Germany because my dad came over when he was 11 after World War II.
Okay. My wife is Portuguese, so all of her family is in Portugal.
Wow. Yeah. So that love of kind of reconnecting with my family history intersected with my eyes of the world getting opened up after just kind of feeling like this athlete that spent all this time at the gym. And all of a sudden I was like, wait, what? What's going on in the world? And so I've been on a journey ever since of just being in a position of a learner and somebody who's like, wait, how is this happening? And why does it?
Well, when you say human rights abuses, unpack that more. So you're in college.
Yes.
Tell me, what was the thing that shocked you?
Yeah. Well, I meet people nowadays who are like, oh, I've been passionate about stopping human trafficking since 7th grade is when I read my first book. And I'm like, wow, I did not have my eyes open to this until I was in my mid-20s. And it was more about just starting to take classes in college about just overall issues in our world, right? And that was during the Kosovo crisis when there was all the Yugoslavia breaking apart and all the genocide happening there. We had things happen in Northern Ireland, obviously studied apartheid in South Africa. And so I just, I had this heart for I need to really just get on my game when it came to understanding more about human rights around the world and what was going on. Okay. So in that journey of post-college, I've literally signed up to try and go to grad school just in anything international. I mean, what was your undergrad? My undergrad was international studies and journalism. I wanted to do broadcast journalism coming out of the University of Oregon.
Full circle.
Using my degree. But at the same time, I went on a study abroad program at the very end of my college career called Semester at Sea. It was 100 days around the world on a cruise ship. And some people would say, oh, that sounds really leisurely and whatnot. But it was a really unique time in the world. We actually were in Egypt during a terrorist attack, and some of my very closest friends got shot out. Just like that. Yeah, 1997, fall of 97. And so I came back home from that trip, had met some refugees that were on the run from Saddam Hussein. I'm really dating myself now in terms of some of these older issues, but it really opened up in me this hunger for understanding more about what was going on in the world and so many people suffering under oppressive regimes and things like that. That was very overt oppression. And when I started hearing about human trafficking, I was like, wow, this is like a silent killer. This is like something that's tearing the moral thread of our communities, and yet it's happening right under our noses, but nobody knows how to really do anything about it. So I actually went and applied for an international
So this is like 97. You're opened eyes to human trafficking, and you're like, okay, this is what I need to address.
Yes. And in some way, right? Now, my parents, when I got home from my study abroad, were like, you need to find a job. So find a job and get out there and start working. And I was like, oh, I'm not done yet. And so that's where I ended up getting into Stanford's one-year master's program in international policy studies. At the same
So
time,
you played basketball in college, and you studied at Stanford. Okay, so you're elite.
so then I came to Stanford, honestly, just to see where I could have this huge love of like literally the world, have it actually kind of get honed into some specialty. And that's where I really landed on international conflict resolution. And I really was like, wow, this is the heart of who I've been as an athlete. This is the heart of who I am as a follower of Christ. I feel like I'm somebody who I've always been wanting to build unity, build bridges, really be somebody who's like, how do we just kind of address conflict? And so at Stanford, I was able to specialize in that. And again, it's a one-year program. It's not like it's all inclusive, but I did come out of that program very interested in conflict resolution. Sidebar, almost went to work for the intelligence community. And when that didn't work, I actually had a life-threatening bike accident at Stanford while I was a student there. And so when I came out of that, I had to stay around the Stanford hospital for the next year because of some of the internal injuries that I had. And that's when I had all that physical strength from my college years kind of stripped away because of this bike accident. I had a lacerated liver, punctured diaphragm, all sorts of injuries internal. Is when I actually first heard Gary Haugen from International Justice Mission, which has become one of the largest anti-slavery organizations in the world. He came to my church and actually gave this athletic analogy. Here's our first one. No, but it really, I can still remember it as if it was today. And he basically was like, hey, he was a football player, I was a basketball player, but he stood up there and he said, you know, I think I always wanted to go to the gym because I wanted to be strong for the game of football. I wanted to be able to get out there and crush people, and so I could relate with all the weightlifting. And he said, but you know, when you go to the gym, the people who have it all figured out, right? They're the bodybuilders. They're the ones in the corner with the sleek muscles and the tight t-shirts, and they seem to have it all figured out. And he paused and he said, but honestly, no offense to bodybuilders, but what's it all for a bodybuilder, right? He's like, you have all this muscle and all this strength, and yet you get up on stage and you just pose. And he, you know, got a chuckle from the crowd, and he was like, when does all that strength ever come to bear, right? Oh, there's a jam jar that needs to be popped in the kitchen, and you run in and you're just like, I got this. And so everybody's just kind of chuckling, and I'm sitting there going, man, I get this, right? Like, we have all this strength in our life, and we built all these muscles up. And then when's it come to use, right? And he said, my prayer for all of you is that you don't become bodybuilders just popping jam jars in the kitchen. And I was like, thank you. Like, I felt like I had grown up in the church. There was a lot about my faith I wanted to bring to bear on just loving the world. I wanted to get out there and put my own strength forward in some way to step in and say it's not okay against some of these human rights abuses I was learning about. And I ended up just deciding to get as close as I could to an organization that was trying to learn that and do flight and smile.
That's essentially why I retired from playing basketball professionally, because I mean now I'm unretiring.
Yeah, I love it.
But I didn't want to pop up in jars. And is basketball as important as it was? I mean, it's really, you can play basketball for you know, impact. In fact, that's why I love Steph Curry and others. They're making such impact with the platform that's been given them.
Yeah.
But for me, so I wasn't retiring from basketball. I was going into a more important sport.
Right. The game of life, right? I mean, it's the muscles of
it's social impact. They're helping one another, building a better world.
Absolutely. So that's what kind of then launched me, even though I'm just like, hey, I'm pretty new to all this, into following International Justice Mission's early years. And I basically just intercepted Gary Haugen before he was...
So is Morales Haugen Ben Patterson?
That's right. So Ben was playing music for a band called Tremolo Live, and they were touring with IJM. And they were...
Maybe Tremolo let us use one of their songs, and we put it in the background here of our podcast. The K-Band, come on, help us out here.
Ben and Justin Dillon love it.
Yeah, Justin Dillon. Justin's, now he has a podcast too.
Right.
About supply chains. He's done tremendous work.
Absolutely.
They produced that documentary, Call and Respond.
That call and response was one of the biggest just game changers for the conversation about human trafficking. And I think one of the things that Ben and Justin knew early on is that music has a way of introducing something to your mind and soul in a different way than just maybe being told something. And so they would have all these incredible people around the world play their songs that we all know, and then they would come off stage and talk about their passion for trying to end human trafficking. And so we'd show that film and people were like, man, I'm ready to go. What can I do? What can I use? What's my platform? And it just exploded in terms of how you could talk about the issue of human trafficking and not have people get bolted to their
Maybe it's the time for Call and Respond too.
Right. Right.
I just saw, have you seen the movie Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yeah.
It's really moving.
Yes. Yeah.
Moving in Live Aid, the largest concert ever.
Yes.
Maybe we need to have a Live Aid for human trafficking.
Yeah, well, I definitely know that there are certain events that have spawned up around all the fires in Southern California that have been modeling themselves after Live Aid in terms of just all the relief efforts out there, for sure. And musicians really saying, hey, I'm going to show up and perform to be able to raise money, with the platforms they have.
Well, this is a great transition into what you're doing now.
Yeah.
Coalition building.
Yeah.
After the LA fires, you just mentioned how people are coming together. I remember it for me, and this kind of explains a little bit about what INNOVAT's about. Yeah. Like after Katrina, remember that? I'm dating myself again.
There you go.
And horrible tragedy.
Yeah.
And then after it, the way Americans respond, we're the most generous people in the world. I'm getting goosebumps right now. And it's like, I have friends. I remember I had far right-wing friends. Like Lakers. I mean, they are right wing from, Central Valley, Salinas area farmers,
Yeah.
Jumped in a truck with their tools in the back, drove there, no plan, just showed up to see how they could help.
Wow.
Came back, stayed a week longer than they should have, come back, go back again. And I was talking with this guy, Jeff Taylor, dear friend of mine is in heaven now. And he's talking about his friends from Burning Man who are as far left as you could get. And he says they're friends because they were building houses together.
Right.
Wow. I never, ever guessed you would ever have a conversation, much less a friend, with someone who's that far opposed to you politically. And it's like, after that, the way America responds, and no one's asking questions, no one's trying to get credit for it, we're just trying to help. And then after a while, it doesn't take long before we love to fight and our arguments and politics come in. But it's like, the good we can do when we have that mentality.
Yeah.
And it makes you proud to be American again. Yeah. But then I always think, and this is really my prayer, is that if we could tap into that side of our mentality of collaborating together, of aligning with a mission, of everyone working together, and we could connect it with the slow burning crisis that is not a fire in LA, but it may as well have been for the families who are devastated or experiencing it, whether it's human trafficking, homelessness, all these different issues. If we could tap into that, what type of world could we create?
Yeah. You touch on something pretty deep in me, which is, the sense of, I think we all have this inclination towards me and mine and kind of insular thinking, whether we know it or not, right? And when these crises come up, it's amazing how, or just stepping in and saying, I'm going to get close to an issue that might be uncomfortable. I know for me, one of the reasons I have so been thankful for the just efforts that I feel like God continues to put me in the place of trying to just do what I can for bringing people together around knowing that trafficking is even going on in our local communities. And I sit there and I go, I'm so thankful because it puts me in places where I'm uncomfortable, where it's outside my comfort zone, where I'm working with people that seem to have different ideas as me. And it's like, I actually get thankful for those moments because you're right. You do end up building friendships, having this amazing group come together in unity in a way where you're like, we might not all stop each other in the grocery store and say, hey, but we are actually working together on something very powerful.
And once you get out of it, like we both, we were talking off camera about both going into prison at San Quentin prison.
Yeah.
And like, I go in there and hopefully that my incarcerated brothers, they are blessed out of it. It's the highlight of their week. They love it.
Yeah.
But we all say we get more out of it than we give.
Right.
I would never have built relationship with these guys.
Yeah.
But it has so transformed my thinking and my life.
Yeah.
And it gives you perspective. And then it's just fun.
Right. And, I was actually the time period, the 18 months where I went into San Quentin, we would go in and we would meet with these guys that in one way or another, they all were interested in the issue of human trafficking. They weren't necessarily traffickers. Some of them were actually gang members who said, hey, I don't actually relate to you as somebody who was actually one of the perpetrators or the trafficker. I relate with the victims because I was a part of a gang and I couldn't get out of it. And they told me if I didn't go do this crime with them, they'd kill my sister, they'd do something to my dog, they do something to my parents. So the stories that these guys shared, and they said the number one thing was they said people coming into San Quentin for other criminal activity, they were asking around the prison, how do I get to know more about human trafficking? So if I ever get out of here, I can get into human trafficking.
Because it's lucrative.
So these guys in the prison were the ones actually saying to us, we're starting an in-circuit TV, like PSAs and things like that within the prison to actually tell people about what trafficking
When was that?
That was 2015, 2016. And I was actually pregnant with my daughter, and talk about like stepping out of your comfort zone to go into a state prison with that kind of, kind of knowing the kind of aura of San Quentin, and like having like 7 gates slammed behind me. And I'm like, wow, just this gal in here wanting to learn from these guys, and yet kind of physically my own personal sense of safety, right? In the midst of being pregnant. And these guys, man, they would share with us stuff that was just out of their experience.
That was the first time you went in, though.
Yeah. Well, I went in over an 18.
No, but I'm curious. How long before that broke? Like where you realized, wow, I don't think of it this way.
Oh yeah, right. Gosh, I just started looking forward to it, because I just, the guys would always say something, or it was just in the offhanded comments of things that would totally change my thinking about life, about them even noticing that I was pregnant. I didn't think any of them noticed, right? And they're like, when are you due? When's your daughter coming? And you sit there and you go, a prison like that is really stripped away of so much that we take for granted, right? Just pets, kids, spouses, friends.
And all those things are best practices to help them rehabilitate.
Right. And so I just think that time period of going in there was kind of the quintessential for me of like, wow, I feel like I'm stepping out of my comfort zone, and yet came to really appreciate it. And again, the guys in there, they saw my height. They saw that they had heard I had played college basketball. They ended up asking if I'd come in and help announce some of the games that they
even football here gets you back in.
Yeah.
Season to announce the game.
That would be amazing. So, but I do think that that's one of those things is that a lot of people are like, yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Brian. Brian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm downstairs.
I'm right now talking to Betty Ann. You're live. This is a live podcast. And we were just talking about our friends at San Quentin prison, and you probably met her. You're probably going to recognize her. She came in and announced play-by-play back in 2016-ish.
Yeah, 10 years ago.
All right. Well, we got to get back to this interview.
Okay.
All right. You're awesome. So there I go. One of my good friends, Brian Gonsolin, who probably at that time was running the whole San Quentin Media Center, and he was the general manager of the whole basketball program.
Wow. Yeah, we would go into the media center. That's where we met, and that's where we would film things. So the guys there had a real passion. That was in the lead up to the Super Bowl in 2016, being at by Stadium in Santa Clara. And the guys in there were like, hey, I'm going to talk to you about my business practices and how I would make the most money around trafficking around the Super Bowl. And so, so much came out from that and great learnings. And we took all our learnings and went to federal and state law enforcement about kind of what their thoughts had been. But the other thing that they said is that, if you interview law enforcement in the Bay Area, they would say every weekend is the Super Bowl in terms of how much trafficking is happening here. It's during those large sporting events. It's not that trafficking really spikes and then it goes away again. It's just that that's when law enforcement and other entities put a ton of money into fighting it. So there's this like big spike in really looking for it. But if they had that much resource every day, every weekend to be looking at trafficking in the Bay, every weekend's the Super Bowl in terms of how much it's happening. So when people started off saying, well, you guys were the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, I said, yeah, because in the 9 counties of the Bay Area, we had every form of human trafficking that's been known to exist in the entire country. So we're talking about not just sex trafficking and having, girls on International Boulevard in Oakland, which is kind of the stereotype. We're having all sorts of illicit massage happening in the hotels of San Mateo.
I don't know if that's a stereotype. I think probably the stereotype is it happens overseas. I think
True. If you want to back it up.
Still there.
Yes.
That it's not really a domestic problem.
Yes.
But no, it is.
And that victims who are here are actually foreign nationals, right? As opposed to American citizens.
As they're not. They're primarily Americans.
Yes.
They're unfortunately, Black and brown women are overrepresented.
Yeah. And it is something where it's almost the younger the victim you go, the more it's American citizens, because it's kids coming out of foster care, coming out of very, early exposure to child abuse and substance abuse, things like that, and maybe coming out of group homes where they don't really have a true association of what love is, what relationships should look like. And California is a major destination for that because of our sunshine, because of our beaches, because of opportunity. And they'll, traffickers will bring people here and say, we're going to just work here. And if you loved me, you would do this for me. They might even take away their cell phone and isolate them, just give them a cell phone that only has one phone number on it, and that's their number. And I sit there and I go, how many of us would still remember too many people's phone numbers now that we got them all plugged into our phones? If somebody took away your phone and only had one number in it, plus they've also told you to never call law enforcement, right? Never dial
Psychological manipulation.
Exactly. It's much more about the emotional and psychological chains that keep people in exploitation than physical.
So educate our audience. Give us the numbers. What's happening? Do you have some literature? I don't know.
I have some literature here, but it's mainly about talking about Freedom Insight, my organization's focus on ending human trafficking in the communities where we all work and live. I think one of the biggest stereotypes is it happens far off. It happens somewhere where again, you said overseas. I think people will also say, oh, as soon as you tell me it's happening here in the neighborhoods around here, they'll be like, I don't go to those neighborhoods. No, trafficking follows the money. It's not just in low-end hotels. It's in very high-end hotels.
I just interviewed
Apartments as well.
Vanessa's young ladies. Well, everyone younger than me, they come mighty. Alicia and Terriel.
Okay.
They're part of her speakers bureaus.
Yep.
So lived experience experts. You got your degrees from Stanford and whatever. They got their degrees from life.
Lived experience.
They know it. Terriel was raised in a strong, loving family. I believe she was either adopted or from the foster care, but adopted young.
Mm-hmm.
Raised in actually a Christian family. Her mother and father were pastors. Okay. She was an elite track athlete. She was at Arizona State as a track scholarship. So you're elite if you get to there on the track scholarship. Right. She's middle class. She's Bay Area middle class. So, I mean, you compare that to the rest of the nation, much less the rest of the world. She's very, in that context, very affluent, did not feel affluent.
Yeah.
It's because of this insecurity. She was targeted and trafficked at Arizona State. Wow. And that's maybe if you're from Stanford, it's not quite Stanford, but that's an elite institution.
Sure. And you're within kind of a covering of being on a sports team and, some accountability and coaches and other folks in your life there.
And none of her friends saw the signs. They wrote them off if they did. Yep. It was about a 10-month journey through hell.
Wow.
And then, she got out of it. Her mother, it's incredible story. And that's another one of the INNOVAT podcast episodes.
Yeah.
We want to really dive in and, action and educated action. We need to be educated about these issues.
That's exactly why we named our name to Freedom Insight, because I don't feel like we're at the point in the anti-human trafficking movement where people should just do anything. They should be having insightful action. You've got to actually understand what you're going to go do.
Yeah, ever since I think my introduction to the thing was way back with Call and Response. And I also read, anyways, that's when I really dove in and was educated and excited and highly motivated. I didn't really get involved working in it other than I supported Ben as much as I could and all that. But the reason I didn't get involved is like wise action. It's like when I really got involved is when I built this partnership with Vanessa, and I realized, okay, the best way I can help, I'm not the frontline guy to do that. The best way is to use my gift to help Vanessa and support her. So I'm on her board.
Awesome.
That's where I really got involved.
Yeah.
But it's like wise action. We need to know what to do.
That's right. We do. And I think that, again, some people will say, well, how do I even get knowledgeable? And what's amazing is I think we have in our minds, sometimes I call it a little bit more of the, like, build a home on a Saturday morning with a group like, say, Habitat for Humanity, and nothing against Habitat, but we kind of want to show up at 8 a.m. and like put some muscle forward, and then by 2 go home and be like, wow, I felt really effective. And fighting trafficking, joining the effort of that is not as kind of 8 to 2 on a Saturday. It's how could you start to listen to a podcast like yours? How could I start to join in with a group that's doing some different things in it? There's different avenues of the movement. I like to break it up into like prevention, intervention, aftercare, and restoration, so that people say, with who I am today, not that now I need to go to law school or I need to become a nurse practitioner or I need to become a lawyer, but with who they have been created to be, how can they connect to the movement in the most effective way? And that they're not going to just get overwhelmed, or 2 weeks later, they're like, whew, that issue's not for me. That was like too crazy. So where is a place where people can say, I'm really interested in learning more about like what laws are coming on board in California about trafficking, or I'm somebody who wants to actually meet survivors and I want to drive them to their doctor's appointments, or I want to help them with getting their resume up to par for a new job or whatever. So you kind of find your place and then try different things. And there's a number of different nonprofits, but that's why we've always been a group that's a bit more of like the collaborative kind of network coalition group.
I love that.
Because people come to us and they're like, I'm passionate about this. I want to fight it. And I'm sitting there going, give me 10 minutes over coffee to talk to you about who you are and how you've been created. And I will plug you in a place in the movement that I think might be sustainable for you.
And even what is the movement? You know, like I've seen there's a huge advantage to bring up human trafficking. Okay. Because that opens people's eyes. It's arguably the worst manifestation of darkness as now. You know, although darkness is dark, there's lots of horrible manifestations of darkness. But really, that's just one manifestation of systemic brokenness.
Yes.
And to solve human trafficking, we're going to really solve systemic poverty holistically, you know? And that if you phrase that in a positive way, this is why I like to use the term, we're still networking it, still workshopping it. It's human flourishing for all. Yeah. That's what it's really about. So movement is about creating environments, creating communities that promote and build towards human flourishing that lifts everybody up. And now the community is resilient. And now human trafficking is not a risk factor anymore.
Yeah.
That's the real movement. So like, for example, all this time where I've been passionate about human trafficking, when I think about it and am moved by it, I realize the biggest place I can make impact is I love playing basketball. I can go to prison and I immediately connect with these guys and we have this sport and we just bond and we play. And it's like, wait, if I can help one of them, and, you know, some of them are in for sexual offenses, some of them are in for violent offenses, some of them should never have been in there, you know, like the 3 strikes rules or whatever. It's a very diverse population. But regardless, if I can help them become strong fathers, and sometimes we think of them as perpetrators, which many times they are, okay? But if you go back to their childhood, this was what was so opening to me. Profiles the same, DEEV, trauma, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. Yeah. But if I can help them be restored and go from, you know, change their risk of recidivizing and continuing in that lifestyle to becoming a good father, a good grandfather, an anchor, a pillar, an oak of righteousness, to use biblical language, in their community. That's directly addressing root issues of human trafficking.
Yes.
And it's about all of this is to say, I love your holistic approach, and that's how we have to think.
I think we have to really think of it in terms of when people say, what could I do? We put it on a time continuum for people. We say, what could you do in 10 minutes? What could you do in 10 days? What could you do in 10 months? And that's actually what I have on our website. You just click on from awareness to action. What are you going to do to act? Click there to get some ideas about, in 10 minutes, I might put the National Human Trafficking Hotline number in my phone, or I might look something up on the internet, or I might listen to a podcast. But in 10 days, I might commit to...
So that's what people can do right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You go to our website, go to freedominsight.org, and if you click on awareness to action, you can see our 10 minutes, 10 days, and 10 months, what you could do to...
So in 10 minutes, you can add the National Human Trafficking Hotline into your phone. You can invite 10 friends to sign up for the Freedom Insight newsletter, or invite 10 we'll put that in the show notes here.
That'd be great.
Great. So you can share this podcast. See, now you can also subscribe to the INNOVAT podcast in 10 minutes, okay? You can get educated. We have several other episodes here to really get educated what's happening. I talk with Vanessa in depth and lived experience experts. You can watch the second part of this one if this is broken down into 2 parts. Okay, great. So you go to their website, humantraffickinghotline.org, and the other one.
Well, and then I would say in 10 days,
Now 10 days. Okay.
Yeah, I really encourage people to find someone who's going to walk with them in this. This is not something to kind of peruse on your own and be like, I'm going to get to know this. Ask who's running with you and really get a partner in this. Because I do feel like a lot of times when people start going deeper into trafficking, it's like, well, why is trafficking something that cracks your heart open? Why is it really tearing at your soul? And a lot of times that's because of some brokenness they've either experienced or seen in their life that they would love to see wholeness and kind of, completeness come back to. And I usually need people around us, good people.
So that you're talking about the need to be healed healers
That's
as
right.
opposed to wounded healers. Yeah, that's a big trap.
Yeah. And then, over the period of 10 months, I think people can really say, I'm going to get close to the issue.
10 days. Also, there's slaveryfootprint.org. This is Justin Dillon.
Coming back to Justin and Ben. But yeah, Justin started something called slaveryfootprint.org. I like to encourage people, just like your carbon footprint, right? And we say, I'm going to take my car less, my bike more. Your slavery footprint is what you own. You plug in all this into their algorithm, and it will tell you how many people are estimated to be held in exploited labor around the world based on what you own. So this is connecting our local anti-trafficking efforts to the larger reality of like coffee we drink, sugar we put in our food, rice, everything like that is made in places where people are actually held in labor trafficking to produce the things that we wear and the things we eat and drink. And so you can actually learn more about that, but that number is not meant to shame you.
No, it's
meant to lower it.
Become aware the same way that, when I eat something, I look at it, and if it's sugar on it, I don't eat it,
Right.
If we can, and now what happens? Now you can get organic food much cheaper than it used to be. You can get it inside of, Costco, for example, where you used to have to go to specialized stuff. Because consumers are putting pressure on the market. They want healthier stuff. They want to be, they want it transparent. They want to know what's in their food.
Yep.
The same thing. Everything you wear has a slavery footprint. If you're aware of it, we as consumers can use our influence to change the world globally just by our buying habits. So that's what they can do in 10 days, and that's safe. Okay.
Right.
So within 10 days, they can find a friend to walk with them, particularly if they're one of those people that are really tugged, like they feel a call to this.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
They can promote this, promote you all on Instagram, follow us on social media, promote this to help ability education. And then in 10 months, okay, what can they do in 10 months?
Well, 10 months, you've had a little bit of time for things to kind of move from your head to your heart, right? There's going to be elements of the movement that you might be like, wow, this one group continues to come to my mind. They do great work. Or there's a group that's really working in my neighborhood. Or, wow, I've really realized that at work, I could actually ask for a certain percentage of my volunteer hours that I can offer through my company. I could actually volunteer with an organization.
Wow, that's beautiful. And also they can probably do that with their giving.
That's right.
They can find an organization to give, and if they work for nearly any company in the Bay Area, for sure, probably nationally, that company will match.
That's right.
Likely match it.
And again, through social media, people have done Facebook and Instagram fundraisers for us. You know, they say, hey guys, I care about trafficking. Here's a group working in our local communities. Check out Freedom Insight. They raise money. People will do bike rides. I've had people doing all sorts of things where they put their own foot forward now that they have a little bit more time and energy, where they've kind of said, this is the piece that I really want to invest in, and I want people to know about that I care about it.
You know, and somewhere right now you can do something. You can put the National Human Trafficking Hotline number in your phone. So now as you get educated and you stumble across somebody who's like, wow, this is a high risk factor. I'm seeing all the tags. That my friend called me and said, wow, I think someone might have been targeting or at least looking at my daughter. And like, you know, wow, now he's aware of it. Okay, there's his daughter, so he was able to, you know, obviously intervene and cut that person out. You know, it's just a chance encounter. That's something they can do right now. Then they can start getting educated. The education is kind of mandatory. This is in our churches. I mean, these are people in our churches. I don't think human trafficking is happening in churches, but sexual exploitation is. So grooming's happening in churches. Yeah, I think we all know about that. Okay. It's happening in our universities, in elite universities. It's happening in our high schools, and it's not just the East Oakland high schools. It's happening in elite prep schools. The grooming's happening.
That's right.
You have to get educated. You get educated, and then it could be as simple as inviting you to speak at their church, or inviting, you know, Love Never Fails or one of their speaker bureaus, get one of those young ladies in to share their lived experience. We have to get educated on this. You know, this is happening. This is prevalent. It's not just a minor issue. It's not something that professionals only can address.
Right.
This is something affecting all of us.
And you called it we want human flourishing. It's not about fighting against something. Like the posture, I like to say, I'm fighting against human trafficking, right? Would be like, get your gloves up and we're just going to go out there, right? And okay, laser are that obvious. There is. But at the same time, when you do this, like I've been in this issue since 2008, or 2000, you know, whatever, early 2000s, really, 2004, is this gets tiring, right?
Yeah.
The posture, the flipping of the coin to human flourishing is a sense of more of your hands being open, of saying, what can I use out of who I am towards this fight, but also who can I bring together? The reason that I'm drawn to human trafficking as someone who is a conflict resolution person at heart is because people who have been working in foster care, people who have been working in HIV/AIDS, people experiencing homelessness, people working with all kinds of marginalized populations, we're now inviting them to the same table to say all those individuals are now at risk of being trafficked. So it's not the new issue. It's like, man, you need to learn to care about this and forget everything else you care about. No, you've been helping tutor kids after school in those hours when they have no parent at home. That's actually helping prevent trafficking. Because what if they're at home and people are grooming them and they're like, hey, you could cause
preventing trafficking in two ways, because it's making the vulnerable not likely to be trafficked, but it's also making the young boys who would be on a trajectory to become, you know, gang members and, you know,
that's right,
and traffickers. It's turning them into productive citizens.
That's right. So think about the ways in your own life with, again, a posture of hands open, of saying, what am I already touching? What am I already involved in? Where I could actually bring awareness to even that organization to say, hey, you guys have been doing after school tutoring forever. Have you guys actually trained the volunteers to know what to look for in terms of signs of potential trafficking in the kids they're helping? So that if a kid comes and is like, oh, you know, well, my mom's not home at nights, you know, and they can't explain some things about where their mom is. What about being asked to go clean apartments on the weekend, but my aunt never gets paid for the work? You know, what about saying, well, unless, you know, so-and-so in my household makes $300 a day, they're beaten or they're not given a place to sleep. Or, you know, those kind of tips are where you can actually help the organizations where you've been working say, you guys actually need to know more about human trafficking. So it's a way in which we're actually having a posture in the side, bringing every trauma around this.
You know, the root is trauma.
Yep.
Yeah.
to be able to see that in these kids. I mean, I grew up in a school where I know now, looking back, there was a kid that was clearly experiencing child abuse at home. But nobody knew how to call it out then. We didn't have mandatory reporters back then, all that. Now we know, and it's like just by helping volunteers who work with organizations that might be touching a population where trafficking could be an issue, it's something where we want to just bring that.
Yeah, and we have to move away from, I mean, there is a place, anger has a place, and there's things that we should be angry about that causes us to fight or flight, and the anger causes us to confront something, it gives us energy, but it's not long-term sustainable. And we also have to get away from blaming, whether we want to blame law enforcement because they're not stepping up to the plate, or whether we want to blame the traffickers,
Right.
which is very, very complex. It's actually, women are very involved in trafficking, and they're very effective at it because they're more trustworthy.
Yeah.
But you look at their background and how they got into it and the trauma they're experiencing themselves,
Yeah.
we have to get out of that blaming and into how do we solve problems and how do we take responsibility for it. And we all have to take responsibility for it. And when we do, that's when the magic starts to really happen and we can change the world.
That's right. So it really starts with people, again, evaluating kind of who they are and where they are as to how they can then reach out and touch and impact the trafficking that might be happening in their sphere of influence. I think the first thing when people hear that we're bringing trainings to frontline individuals, say in the airport industries or at hotels or apartments, where the traffickers in San Quentin told us, I move, work, and sleep my victims.
I love that. See, rather than considering them victims and being angry and punitive and, wow, let's go get revenge, you went in there, you empathized, it changed your life.
Absolutely.
And then the knowledge you got, and now these incarcerated individuals are being part of the solution while they're incarcerated by giving you insight of what they learned from the industry.
That's right.
Wow, that's beautiful.
And they
Let's
just
start that.
I know. And I feel like they said, hey, I'm going to be honest. You sound like somebody who's really great with your trainings, but, just because you trained this like one civic group in this city, it's not going to stop me from putting my girls out on the street, right? I'm making too much money. And so they said, you got to go to where I'm moving them, where I'm sleeping them, where I'm working them. So we just said, okay, that means transportation, that means hotels, that means apartments. And man, if you talk to somebody working at a front desk in a hotel and you say, do you think you see trafficking when you come into work? And if they say, well, what's trafficking? And you give them a 1, 2, 3 of kind of what it could look like. Most front desk staff that I've talked to have said, oh, if that's what it is, I see it on a weekly basis. So now we're empowering those employees to actually know how to not only recognize what it is, but how to effectively report it so that they can actually help people when they go to work. And man, that's empowering. So, these employees at airports that we've been working with that say, oh, I don't think trafficking happens here. And I'll say, really? You're working at the info desk and somebody comes up and asks you what city you're in. Like, hello, our phones blow up the minute we land somewhere and it says, welcome to wherever, and Yelp's telling you where to eat and all this. And it's like, for people who are working even in a volunteer capacity within these industries, they're starting to recognize that they're coming into contact with human trafficking victims on a daily or weekly.
Help them change their mindset and realize you're actually a frontline worker.
That's right.
Hey, this is where it's happening, and they have to get by, they have to stay incognito.
Yeah.
And if we can help them.
So that's the other information I have for people is if they know somebody in, transportation industries, working for a bus company, working for an airline, working for a hotel chain, to connect us at freedominsight.org with them. Because, man, that's what we do. We take our trainings with online platforms. We go to airports. They end up disseminating our trainings to thousands of individuals that work there. And we have had incredible stories of an employee who sensed something was off. They end up giving a tip. Not only is that individual helped, but we've actually taken down entire trafficking rings.
Yeah, you shared that before, and you used the line that the guy in prison that said, I'm glad you're educating the Rotary group.
Right.
That's not a threat against. That's not a threat to me.
At all.
So, but you start. And then you pivoted to educating hotels and airports, right? That's your primary focus.
Yep.
So tell, what are you doing right now? Let's turn into that. What is Freedom Insight all about? What are you doing right now? And what's your future?
Yeah, well, our paths crossed because, we were talking with Vanessa in East Palo Alto and talking about just what are Bay Area communities doing around this on-ramp to 2026 when both the World Cup and the Super Bowl are coming to the Bay Area. So again, it kind of brings up that conversation point of trafficking is not, it's a 365-day-a-year issue. It doesn't just come to the town.
Well, let's hold back a little.
Yeah.
What I've found, I'm not as educated as you, and I'm talking with people who are less educated than maybe the clientele you're talking with. I found that it's the idea that the Super Bowl is the largest human trafficking event, which those in the industry have known that's been around for a while now, that understanding, that's eye-opening. Okay, so human trafficking happens around every sporting event. There's a spike in it. And the Super Bowl is the largest sporting event in the U.S., so there's a spike in human trafficking. Now there's been a lot of awareness around it. So there's human trafficking happening 24/7. It's right underneath our noses. But that kind of amplifies it a little.
Yes. No, it's not so much that it's like spiking in terms of how much it's happening around the sporting events. It's just law enforcement and other entities are looking for it more during those times. So the way I'd say it is, it's an opportunity for everyone right now to be spiking in their interest of how am I going to actually tell people this is happening here, because we have this huge awareness event coming in 2026 with both the World Cup and Super Cup.
That's what I loved what you shared, is that now these are awareness events where people are aware of this issue. But the first paradigm shift we need to do is, while we're enjoying our nachos and rooting for one team or the other, okay, horrible, horrible things are happening right around us that we just accept because we're refusing to open our eyes and see what's happening on the streets we drive down. Okay, that's number one. Okay, while we are having one of the highlights of our year, people are having the low light in triple darkness. We have to have, that's the first step. Second step, we have to realize this is happening 24/7 in our beautiful, wonderful, developed American freedom countries. And you can't blame the Democrats or the Republicans, and there ain't one administration that's going to solve it. We're going to have to own it and all humble ourselves that this is the society that we've built, and we have to all together rebuild it and heal it.
That's right. It's like a moral fabric that's been torn, and we have to ask just kind of how can we all pick up our needles and start sewing it back together. It's a journey, but it is something where events like this can create the burning platform to talk about it in a way that is like, no, this is happening all the time, but we're kind of turning our attention to it because of.
I love that. That was your input to the East Palo Alto.
Uses your advantage to break it into advantages. Yeah.
And again, that's another beautiful story that people, we always focus on the negative. East Palo Alto in 2023, how many murders were there in East Palo Alto in 2023? Do you know?
I don't know.
In 2023, in East Palo Alto, when my friend Lisa Gaucher was the mayor of that and community, Paul Baines and others have been working together, there were 0 murders. That kind of made national news, but not really. Like, I've noticed nearly everyone remembers that East Palo Alto was the murder capital of the U.S.
Yep.
Okay? It didn't just happen that murders disappeared. The community worked together. The faith community, the social service providers. The whole reason East Palo Alto is a city is because they wanted to control their own police so they could do community policing. They had a group like the White Hats that would be community leaders, pastors and coaches and teachers, big guys. They put on white hats so they know who they were, the hard hats. And they go out to the neighborhoods where violence was happening. When they were there, the community, the young kids would respect them. All those things worked. And also demographics as well. But they proactively worked on it, and they solved gang violence in 2023. There was no gang murder, not gang shred violence. There's still gang violence, but they solved gang murders. 0.
Yeah.
We can solve human trafficking.
Well, I think the thing that makes trafficking so difficult is that it is happening right under our noses. And the minute people discover it's happening in their own community, the closer and closer it gets to home, the more vulnerable people feel. So the more they want to go ostrich in the sand, don't tell me that. I'm never going to send my kids to the mall or to the movie theater again. And instead of a fear-based response, we need to have a resiliency model, right? Palo Alto couldn't erase its history, but it said we could have a different future. And that's where I think trafficking is more of this silent killer of our community, where people are, there's all sorts of labor trafficking happening, people not getting paid, people being abused, people being exploited, but it's not as kind of visual as a murder, right? It's happening where people are being abused and really it's right under the surface. And if you ask anybody who's like, oh my gosh, you just told me that it's now happening in my community, why doesn't law enforcement do something? And law enforcement would say, we're reliant upon people in the community letting us know where they think stuff is off. So the first tips around human trafficking in the Bay Area were a nanny dropping kids off at school. And while the kids looked totally fine and really nicely put together, she was disheveled and had the same outfit on for like 5 months in a row. And finally, the parents and the teachers at the school were called the FBI and were like, something's off. And that was in Walnut Creek, of all places. The first case that was prosecuted in the Bay Area was in Walnut Creek with a nanny that was being made to sleep under the stairs, not given enough food. She was often beaten if she didn't take care of the kids. All I'm saying is it takes that citizen who says something is off enough so that authorities can properly act in a way that is trauma-informed, victim-centered, where they're not then going out and arresting someone, but saying this could be somebody in harm's way. And so we need both. We need the citizen action of people's eyes and ears, and we need law enforcement and other stakeholders at the city and county level to really care about this issue and to acknowledge it's happening here.
Okay. Love it. Okay, so I love how you're using your background, conflict resolution. I love the fact that you were educated in, overseas of these big issues that we all, and then you're leveraging that to come back to address the wars, the silent wars happening right underneath our noses domestically. And I'm very optimistic because I see the world coming. I see the opportunity for us to come together. But I'm optimistic if we will get involved. So I say optimistic because I'm getting involved.
Yeah.
And, I think Abraham Lincoln said the best way to predict the future is to make it happen. We've got to create the future we want. But what's your plan? Okay, where are you guys at? Where, I'm thinking of a pastor friend of mine in Jacksonville. Are you guys in Florida? Can he call you up and you help him? Tell me where you're at.
Oh, yeah, sure.
How can people partner with you? How can we all work together? What's your plan to end human trafficking, and how can we help you?
Thanks. Well, when we started off as the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, we did not set out to be some huge, massive nonprofit. We just said, let's address it here in our hometown and have people actually know it's happening here so we can make a difference, right? Well, then all of a sudden, because we have every form of human trafficking known in the whole U.S., here in the 9 counties of the Bay Area, some of the best practices and things we were learning, other communities around the country started saying, we want to talk to you. We want to find out more about that. And so our major dissemination model has been through airports, through hotel chains, and working with different companies that are like, so yes, we're in Florida because we've trained the Daytona Beach Airport on addressing and recognizing trafficking. So we work with airports. They might have a connected hotel that we might train. And then oftentimes we will connect them then with their community task force in their part of Florida that is a group that's already together. So our dissemination model is any single individual can actually go online and type in, if they live in, let's say, Redwood City Human Trafficking Task Force, or San Mateo County, look up your county human trafficking task.
That would always your website.
Yep. Or they would reach out to us. But
Okay.
You can find out 10 minutes, 10 days, 10 months. Go to our website at Freedom Insight. You can also Google about your own county's human trafficking task force and just ask as an individual, can you come to a meeting? Because they often just are open to public people and citizens. And then really it's about circling around with a trusted organization, with a trusted individual. And we're happy
On your website, you have a curated, vetted organizations like Love Never Fails is on your website?
No, well, we are building a new website right now, actually, with our new Freedom Insight logo and name, but we will have that on there. But we're just really personal. I mean, if somebody wants to send me an email, it's
The House of Web3, what's happening here at the Hard SF and Geo, who's sponsoring this podcast, can help in that. They're building a Web3 platform to basically help you do that. That deeply vetted and a trusted source where you can go in and say, okay, these are good organizations, because not everyone who's saying they're helping human trafficking are actually helping it.
That would be the number one thing I would say, Ted, is we are about calling out the smoke and mirrors in the anti-trafficking movement, and there's some group.
Well, that's why we've got to keep talking. That's why we got to have you back and be a speaker at We Hard SF. And Geo is a Web3 platform tool to solve this issue. And others, how do we verify what is truth? So this is definitely.
So there's something for the individual on our website, and there's also something for somebody who finds himself in a frontline industry.
And your website is, again, say it very clearly.
freedominsight.org.
Wonderful.
Thanks, Ted. Yeah, and I really appreciate the conversation. I learn as much from you as I hope maybe I can offer to you.
Yeah, and so the pastor in Jacksonville I'm thinking of is Bishop Vaughn McLaughlin. Okay. So I'm calling you, Bishop. I want you to connect and reach out to Betty Ann. They're already in Florida. I just feel this. One of the things that was coming to my mind is he built his church off of the Lord spoke to him and says, I want you to target for your prayers and for your outreach the pimps, and the drug dealers, because they're the entrepreneurs in your community and they're the leaders. And so his model was they started praying for him and reaching out. And when one would get, have an encounter and say, I want to leave that, he said, okay, come to the church, I'll employ you. And, you're going to be a janitor, you're going to learn how to serve, and you're going to get your brain detox. Okay. And after 12 months, he says, on your anniversary, he says, okay, now I want you to activate your entrepreneurial gift for positive. And then they came up, they started all these businesses. They couldn't loan to one, like they opened a bowling alley, they opened all these other things. They were trying to get money. And it turns out if you're a former pimp and drug dealer, you might be a great entrepreneur, but it's hard to get a loan because, they want a loan to felons. Right. They opened a credit union to just facilitate loans within their church. So they had a big, it ends up growing to becoming the fastest growing credit union in the state of Florida. And he gets honored by the state of Florida as Entrepreneur of the Year. Anyways, I was thinking of him. That would be a great connection. So,
well, you do bring up something, which is, there are incredible groups right here in the Bay Area that are helping those with lived experience in human trafficking get employed and have viable employment. Now, when the movement kind of started and people were like, oh my gosh, victims of trafficking. And, we started out with things that just were these small little crafty things that they could do that nobody in the Bay Area could make enough money to pay the rent to stay here. Now we have groups like Annie Cannons. They train in web development and training. Love Never Fails has its IT biz.
Do you know that they learned? Did you hear this? They basically did an informal study that demonstrated that survivors of trafficking are better at cybersecurity than the general population. Survivors of trauma.
Sure.
Survivors of trauma. And it's like, wow, not only are they good, can they do these jobs, they're better. They're the ones you want to hire because they've learned through lived experience how to be hyper alert, how to not trust anything, how to be suspicious, how to be OCD on details.
Amazing. Wow. So I would say if anybody's listening to this and they're a small business owner, consider not out of charity hiring someone, but literally out of they've got the competitive advantage on cybersecurity and other things. But those are two great groups I definitely.
Also there's a myth, people are very hesitant to hire people with a record who come out of prison. Do you know that's also a myth? Because one, hiring anybody is a risk. So yes, it's a risk to hire anybody.
Sure.
But it turns out statistically that people who have a record and a background are better employees because they're grateful for the opportunity. So they work harder and they're less likely to leave. Wow. And there's a science. You can mitigate your risks. What type of environment do you need to have? How can you be aware of their background and of their trauma so that now you can, mitigate your risks and bring the most and create human flourishing for all.
I love it. The one thing I would say too is that anybody listening to this, I would hate for them to feel like, man, the conversation is so, far down the road. I feel like I'm late to the game. One of the things at Freedom Insight that we pride ourselves on is that we want everyone to feel welcome in wherever they're at. And so even though we may have conversations that are at what I would say at like the 3.0 level of kind of where the movement's at or how to fight trafficking, we always have this on-ramp for somebody who literally might be listening and going, okay, this is the first day I'm going to actually believe that this is happening in my hometown, or this is happening for me is on my street. When it hits home, I want people to know that there is a place they can start and that they're welcome. Because if we just kind of start and go, hey, you got to like basically have a college degree in this, right? Everybody's going to be like, I'm out. It needs to be approachable. And so I very much appreciate your insights, Ted. I think you modeled that. And I also want to say that Freedom Insight is here for those conversations, for having coffee and just saying, where are you at and how can we help?
Well, it was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you so much. We have to do this again. I want to go into prison again. I want to hear you do play-by-play announcement. Maybe we can do it March 29th in Solano Prison. All right, up and back at the... Yeah, okay, check your calendar. So we'd love to have you in. So thank you so much for being a guest, and check out their website and reach out to us. And if you enjoyed this, subscribe to our podcast and share it with others. Let's get educated so we can change the world.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.